Welcome to the DFO Fantasy Show team preview series. I'm managing fantasy editor of Daily Faceoff.com, Mark Scheig, and today we're going to be covering the Columbus Blue Jackets. The Blue Jackets were one of the most surprising teams in the NHL last season, making a 23-point jump from 2024 and narrowly missing the playoffs in the East. Columbus became a top 10 offense thanks to the reemergence of players like Sean Monahan and breakouts from Kirill Marchenko, Adam Fantilli, and Kent Johnson. The sportsbooks are expecting similar results for Columbus this year, competitive, but just outside the playoffs yet again for the 6th straight season. Their 85.5 point projection is the 10th highest in the Eastern Conference and 21st overall. Now let's take a look at the Blue Jackets projections, rankings, ADPs for the upcoming fantasy season. We will start with Kirill Marchenko, who is the first Blue Jacket coming off the board with an ADP of 112. As a late 9th, early 10th round pick, Marchenko offers incredible upside. The DFO consensus rankings have him ranked 3 or 4 rounds earlier in the draft. Marchenko set new career highs in goals and assists with 31 goals and 43 assists last year. He finished 7th in the NHL in even strength goals, scoring just 2 power play goals on the season. Some positive regression to the 5% power play shooting percentage should help Marchenko be a threat for potentially 40 goals in 25-26. Just a great draft day value right now. And similar to Marchenko, Adam Fantilli did a lot of his damage at even strength last season. From January 1st through the end of the season, Fantilli was 2nd in the NHL in even strength goals with 22, tied for 18th in even strength points with 36, and 26th in even strength shots on goal with 101. To put that into perspective, over a full 82-game pace, Fantilli would have produced 67 even strength points. That would have been tied with Kyle Connor and Mitch Marner for 7th in the NHL, behind only David Pastrnak, Nathan MacKinnon, Nikita Kucherov, Leon Draisaitl, Brandon Hagel, and Connor McDavid. Just the elite of the elite. That level of 5v5 dominance is a clear signal for a breakout season on the horizon for Fantilli. If he's able to earn an extended run on the Blue Jackets' top power play unit this season, he'll easily end up being one of the biggest deals at ADP, with his ADP currently approaching the undrafted territory. Just one of my favorite draft picks overall so far this season. Sean Monahan had 57 points, 19 goals, 38 assists in just 54 games last season. An injury in mid-January cost him a chance at his second career 80-point season. And really, there's not much to suggest that it's not repeatable. With a borderline undrafted ADP, Monahan is a no-risk, high-upside pick that could return you 25 goals and 40 assists this season. Boone Jenner also dealt with a long-term injury last season, requiring shoulder surgery before the season even started and not making his season debut until after the Four Nations face-off. He hit the ground running, though. He finished with 19 points, 7 goals, 12 assists in 26 games, a 60-point pace. Jenner is more of a banger league target, but he can be a cheap category stuffer in those leagues in the last 3 rounds of your fantasy draft. Lastly, both Kent Johnson and Dmitry Voronkov are going undrafted. Johnson's role seems a little bit more defined, but Voronkov also has the potential to be a top 6 player throughout the course of the season. Yegor Chinakhov is kind of the guy on the outside looking in, but Johnson, he got off to a really, really slow start, but then in the second half of last season, he was great, scoring at a 27-goal, 42-assist pace in his final 43 games. His shot volume will ultimately limit his goal scoring upside, and his lack of category coverage makes him a little bit less value, kind of a one-trick pony, but he could be a waiver wire ad that tops 70 points this season. He's kind of built in the same fantasy archetype as an Anze Kopitar, which doesn't have a ton of value. Kopitar is going at pick 160 right now, but if Johnson's able to level up, he could end up being an even better player there. Voronkov, obviously, just a guy that's going to be worth monitoring as the season starts. If he ends up in the top 6, I think he's worth an ad early in the season to see how things start. Last year got off to a great start. We'll see how things can go and progress over the entirety of this season. On the blue line now, Zachary Werenski was an absolute fantasy darling last season. His ADP of 115.5 last year was literally one of my favorite picks. I wrote him up as one of my favorite draft day values in the DFO draft kit last year. Make sure you check out this year's Daily Faceoff draft kit for more sleepers and must draft picks. He paid off handsomely last year, so much so that his ADP has jumped nearly 100 spots this year. He's currently being drafted as the number 20 player overall and the 3rd or 4th defenseman off the board. I think that draft price is fair, but the reason he went so late last year was due to durability concerns. He was able to play 81 games last year, but it's hard to ignore the injury history when taking a player in the late 2nd round. Still, as I said, last year, when healthy, he's literally one of the best offensive defensemen in the NHL, and it showed last season when he ranked 1st among defensemen in shots on goal, 2nd among defensemen in goals, 2nd in points, 4th in assists, and 8th in power play points. When healthy, he is absolutely outstanding. Outside of Werenski, all the other Blue Jackets defensemen should probably open the season on the waiver wire in standard formats. But keep Denton Mateychuk and Dante Fabro on your watch list. Mateychuk has second-year breakout potential, and Fabro was just an absolute great fit in Columbus after getting traded on that top pair with Zachary Werenski last year. So two guys to keep an eye on early in the season if you need some, if you're desperate for D help. Fabro might be a decent option early in the season. Mateychuk is a guy whose role will likely grow throughout the course of the season and has breakout potential, as I said. Between the pipes is where things start to get murky for the Blue Jackets. Elvis Merzlikins is the incumbent, but has posted a sub-900 save percentage in 3 straight seasons. Meanwhile, Jet Greaves is in line for his first full NHL season and has played very well in small samples in each of the last 3 seasons. If I'm targeting one of them this year, it's Greaves. It feels like he has the upside that Merzlikins at this point just doesn't seem to possess, and I think that Greaves is worth a dart throw as your number 3 fantasy goalie at the very end of your draft. Where Merzlikins, he's somebody that's going to hit the waiver wire to start the season, see how he goes, see how this timeshare ends up breaking up. I think it's probably going to be 50-50 to start, but I think that Greaves has got the ability to really separate himself and maybe push for 50 starts in his first full NHL season. We are now joined by Mark Scheig of the Hockey Writers for Columbus Blue Jackets beat writer. Mark, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Brock. Thanks for having me.
No problem. You have been an invaluable Blue Jackets follow over the years, so we appreciate all of your hard work on the beat over the years. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of the fantasy hockey questions that I have surrounding the Blue Jackets this year, I just want to know, who do you think has the potential for a breakout campaign in 25-26?
There's a couple good candidates for this, Brock, that could easily make it as a breakout. I'll name 2 minor names, and then there's one that really sticks out for me. So the ones I'm looking at, Denton Mateychuk is certainly one that could have a breakout. I know we're probably going to talk about goaltenders later. Jet Greaves is another one, especially the way you saw at the end of last year. But the guy I'm looking at is someone that I think could eventually be the Blue Jackets' leading scorer. Last year was a real big stepping stone for him after coming off a season where he battled some injuries. But that's Kent Johnson, and he's somebody who is probably going to start on the second line, going to play with Adam Fantilli. And if you've noticed, during the World Championships, they played together. They were line mates most of last year. And he had his best season by far, 24 goals, 57 points, playing on the top power play unit, playing top 6 minutes. He had some big-time streaks when he was on the ice. Everything was going in for him. A couple things, big shooting percentage, like 19.5% shooting on 24 goals. So maybe a little bit of regression there, but his playmaking ability, he's getting better. He's getting stronger. He is a gym rat. So it wouldn't be surprising if he comes into this season even stronger than he has been, which will obviously benefit him. And like I said, I feel like he can be somebody, Werenski led the team last year with 82 points. Johnson can eventually get to that point where he could be in that 75, 80 plus point range over the next year or two. And I just think that bigger breakout is coming, just given everything that he can bring to the table.
Yeah, finished the season really strong as well, right? So he's got a lot to build off coming into this season. Him and Fantilli seem to work really well together. He had 21 points in his final 26 games of last season. You said we're going to probably touch on some goaltending, and that seems to be the biggest question mark surrounding the Blue Jackets this season. A couple questions here. Do you think Jet Greaves is the answer for the Columbus Blue Jackets? Is he the number 1 goaltender entering the season? Like, every single time he gets called up, he has just exceeded expectations. He's been fantastic. So how do you think the Blue Jackets will handle their crease this year with Merzlikins and Jet Greaves? And do you think Jet Greaves can really be that guy to start maybe 50 games and potentially bring this team back to the playoffs?
That is the question that everybody is pondering. And as we sit here right now, Brock, I don't know who's starting opening night. I don't think the Blue Jackets know who's starting opening night. We know that it's going to be Merzlikins. We know that it's going to be Greaves. They're probably going to bring another goaltender in, maybe as a third, in case one of them gets injured. And actually, Don Waddell has admitted that they're actively looking for a goaltender, so that might go into training camp. But I feel like this is open competition, especially at the start. Now, Waddell said, we talked to him recently, he's confident that both guys can do the job, but this is going to be an open competition. I think training camp, I think the preseason is really going to determine who's going to start. And if you know anything about Dean Evison, he rides the hot hand. think a big reason why Daniil Tarasov was moved to Florida, you know, certainly injuries didn't help, but Merzlikins played a lot of games, and then when things started going south, they brought Jet Greaves up, and it's Greaves' calmness and just what he's able to bring the confidence to his teammates. There's a chance that Greaves could start opening night, but then at the same time, Merzlikins is the one with the big contract and certainly has a lot to prove to show that he still has it. So can the two of them figure it out and get the Blue Jackets to the playoffs, given they didn't make a ton of changes on their team? That's the biggest question in my mind. Who's going to start opening night? We're going to have to let that one play out. But if I had to, take a stab at it, I would probably lean Merzlikins starts opening night. But I'm 50-50 at this point. Greaves could easily be the starter as well.
So if you had to handicap it, you would say it's probably like a 50-50 split entering the season, and then if one of them really pushes ahead of the other, then they'll ride the hot hand.
Yeah, and if you're drafting for fantasy, folks are going to look at a timeshare there, and they're not going to be sure really where to draft them. But a couple interesting lottery tickets there. But if I had to pick one over the longer course of the year here, the Greaves I think has the higher upside. But I know the Blue Jackets still like where Merzlikins has come. He has the respect of Evison. He has the respect of Waddell. So they're going to really lean on him to have a bounce back year. So the splits, I think, the starts are going to be pretty even. But if you want a higher upside goalie, I would tend to lean on Greaves if you had to go in that direction.
Yeah, that's kind of exactly where I was going to go with it. Greaves feels like he's got maybe the higher ceiling, and we kind of know what we've got in Merzlikins, but we've seen him go on stretches where he's played splendid hockey as well, so it'll be interesting to see how this one plays out over the season. I agree. 50-50 probably entering, and we'll see where it goes from there. Let's talk about Zachary Werenski. Obviously, he was unbelievable last year, and it made me look good because I've been somebody that's been extremely high on Werenski over the years, and he's always put up extremely strong point per game numbers, and staying healthy has always been a bit of an issue. But last year kind of was he finally put it all together, and it was just unbelievable to see what he could do in a full season. How repeatable do you think his 24-25 season is heading into this year?
It's very repeatable, and I think there's a couple of things that we can lean on to say that the chances of that are very high for him to do that. So we saw the international tournament, saw it the Four Nations, we saw it the World Championship. He was one of the best defensemen at both and was named the best defenseman at the Men's World Championships on top of the season he already had. I think a lot of folks on the outside are like, well, where did this come from? He's been injured. And so once he changed his workout routine, put a lot of emphasis in changing his diet, his nutrition, and really putting the work in the gym, that helped him get to a point where he was able to play so much. He played almost 27 minutes a night, and to be able to put 23 goals and point per game, he can easily do it. And you figure going into the season, can he repeat those kind of numbers? Sure. Just the reason for that is the way that he thinks the game. He's so smooth. He knows where to go with the puck. He's always looking to shoot. If there's one thing about Zach Werenski, he's always looking to shoot. If there's an opportunity, he's going to get it toward the net. He's going to play every important situation. He's going to quarterback that power play. When you consider the up-and-coming young players that the Blue Jackets have, we talked about Johnson, Adam Fantilli got the 31 goals last year. So there's going to be a lot of talent there. Kirill Marchenko is another one that got to over 30 goals last year. So the Blue Jackets were a top 6-7 offensive team for the whole season. And I think a lot of folks on the outside just forget how not only young, but how talented they really are. And so when you have that kind of talent, and then you have a player like Werenski that can distribute the puck, it's definitely repeatable. I'm not sure if he can get to a point per game this season again. He certainly could. Maybe, if you're looking at a floor, easily 60 points. I would even say between 70 and 80 points is a safe bet. And then if they're able to repeat the performance up front, there's always a chance that he can exceed those 82 points.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that stood out last year was the increase in shot volume, added nearly 50 shots to his 82 game pace from what he had done the 3 previous seasons, and he was still able to manage a shooting percentage above 7%. He's a 7.1 career shooter, 7.7 last year. So even with all the added shots, he was still able to score at a pretty impressive clip. He's always been one of the elite goal scorers at the position. So he made me look good last year. I'm definitely going back to the well this year. Absolutely love Zach Werenski. You mentioned him a little bit already, Kirill Marchenko.
Yep.
What do you expect from him in 25-26? From October through February, he was on pace for 35 goals and 88 points over 82 games, but he finished on just a 25 goal, 25 assist pace in his final 23 games. So kind of the tale of two seasons there for Marchenko, cooled off there in the second half. Do you think he's more like the player we saw in the first half, more like the player that we saw in the second half, or maybe somewhere in between the middle?
I would say more toward the first half with a little combination. So it's a great question that you bring up about Marchenko, because it applies to other players on the team where there are a couple important things to remember. First was the Sean Monahan injury. So when you think about the Blue Jackets top line for most of last year was Sean Monahan, Kirill Marchenko, and Dmitry Voronkov was on that line, and a couple other players were interchanged. But when Monahan and Marchenko were on the ice together, they were one of the best lines in the entire NHL. So when he went down, that meant Marchenko had to play with Adam Fantilli, which that certainly helped Fantilli, but it did slow Marchenko's pace down a little bit. And then overall, when you look at after the Stadium Series, especially when they beat Detroit, everything was going really well, but then they had that tough stretch of games where they had to go to Tampa, go to Florida, and their offense just dried up. They couldn't score on anybody. And then it was that little stretch that kind of helped slow Marchenko's pace down. But with Monahan back, Fantilli's going to be in place. Just the center depth is good. Adding Charlie Coyle helps that center depth. I think Marchenko is locked in at right wing one, and somebody who can easily can exceed 31 goals. Shooting percentage, I think, is in a pretty good place where he can sustain it. He showed that he was a playmaker last year with his 43 assists. So just the fact that he is a more well-rounded player than I think he got credit for, I would expect him to, especially playing with Monahan, he'll have the chance to be able to put up those similar numbers like he did at the start of last season.
Just one other player I want to touch on really quick is Igor Chinakhov. A lot of question marks surrounding him entering the season. He's basically going to be a third-line player for the Blue Jackets at this point and maybe requesting trades. Is he a player that you think that, fantasy owners can maybe target later in drafts, or is he somebody that's just kind of like a stay away from him right now because his role is so clearly undefined?
Well, that's a great question. And with the trade talk that's out there, Don Waddell already had a conversation with Chinakhov and his agent, and while they're certainly going to look for a trade to see if there's something that they can make happen, they're not just going to do it because there's a trade request. They expect him to be with the Blue Jackets at camp if they can't find a trade. So what is his role going to be? That's going to be lower in the lineup probably. If you think about how the Blue Jackets are going to look at the start, remember last year Boone Jenner was injured in training camp and didn't come into the lineup until March, essentially, February, March. So he's probably going to be that top line left winger. Chinakhov played some time on the top line at the start of last year. That's going to be Boone Jenner. We think Dmitry Voronkov is going to be the other guy in the top six. It's going to be a winger as well. So that would actually push a guy like Chinakhov into the third, maybe even a fourth line role if he's not traded. So you can look at it a couple ways. Either avoid to see what kind of clarity he gets with the Blue Jackets, or maybe you can take a really late flyer in the event that he ends up in a situation on a different team. Maybe I'm just speculating here, not reporting anything, but like if the Leafs were to go and get him and put him into a position, and suddenly you have a lottery ticket on a really good offensive team. So wait and see with him. There's a lot of different possibilities that can end up there, but right off the bat here, I would wait a little bit.
Yeah, so you expect fully him to be a bottom six player if he remains with the Blue Jackets to start the season?
At least to start, yes.
Excellent. That's all I've got for you today, Mark. I really appreciate you coming on and talking Blue Jackets with us. I hope you have a great kind of remainder of what's left of the summer here heading into the hockey season.
Much appreciated. Always great to talk with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for watching this video. If you want more great fantasy hockey and betting content from myself, Carter Hutton, Matthew Barnaby, and the rest of the DFO analysts, make sure you subscribe to the DFO Fantasy and Betting YouTube channel today and never miss a minute.